My entire venture was hinging on that particular meeting with Dr. Denis Mukwege, the Nobel Peace Prize recipient in 2018.
Milan was born in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and although he no longer lives there, his life's mission is to help his country and empower its natives. And that's been the theme across the 3 companies Milan founded. Milan was driving around Congo one day when he saw billboards advocating for skin bleaching, and it really bothered him. So he created Eben, a cosmetics brand catering to the specific skincare needs of people of color, because he wanted people to embrace their natural skin tone. Eben has been featured in Forbes and Miami Herald, but Milan knew he needed a lot more funding to really scale it. So he started another company in the real estate tech space to pump cash into Eben. This property management and hospitality company, FlashStay, now generates over $1 million a year in revenue. But that wasn't enough. Milan still felt like he could do more to help his country, so he partnered with a Nobel Peace Prize recipient to start his 3rd company called Congo Clothing to raise awareness for rape and war in the Congo. From cosmetics to real estate tech to clothing, this serial entrepreneur has set out to create successful companies that can make a real impact on his country, solving one problem at a time.
I was born in the Democratic Republic of Congo in Central Africa.
What was life like there?
Shortly after I was born, a civil war starting, building up. So my family moved to France when I was very young. I think I was about 2 years old.
From 2 to 13, you then live in 7 different countries.
And then my dad was working for an American company, ExxonMobil. So we went on a huge sort of like world tour, lived on 7 different countries.
What was it like living in 7 different countries as you're growing up?
So as a kid, in the moment, it's a little challenging, right? Because every other year, your parents, knock on your door and they're like, hey, we're going this place. And then you have to go to school the next day and say bye to your friend. So that can be a little emotionally challenging as a kid. In hindsight, it was an amazing experience because I got to absorb a lot of different culture, but on a very deep level, right? So there's a difference when you travel to a country versus living in that space.
Right.
So,
then you go back to Congo for 2 years, and then you finish high school in Paris.
yes,
And then you decided to go to US.
yes. I went to a place called IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida. It's a very popular sports academy. They train athletes. So I went to IMG to do a gap year because I needed to improve my English, but more importantly, take the standardized tests that you need to go to college.
Got it. So you're playing soccer in the morning.
Yeah.
In the afternoon, you're taking classes.
Yeah,
And at the end of that year, now you're ready for college.
absolutely, yeah. I started undergrad in DC, so I go to American University for a few years, and then I transferred to the University of Miami, which is where I got my bachelor's from in 2015. To me, like the major that made the most sense for someone who thinks of himself as a generalist was economics. So my major was in economics, and I did a minor in finance.
Right.
I did a lot of internships. I worked at Citibank. I worked for Total, which is the French gas giant. I worked for the Democratic Party in Washington D.C. So I try to rack in experiences in politics, business, energy. That got me a super broad perspective. I came to the conclusion that that was enough. I did not need to do more after college, and I could take sort of that leap of faith and start my entrepreneurial career right away.
So how soon after you graduated college did you start your entrepreneurial career?
I started right away, and so my first startup was a skincare company called Eben. And it took me about a year after school to set it up, like understand, like the world of cosmetics, which is it's a world of its own.
You graduate college and with no experience in cosmetics, and you're not a chemist, and how do you go from there to creating a wildly successful skincare product?
So while I was in college, I would always travel back to Congo for the winter break. And when I was in Congo, I would always see driving around these huge billboards for cosmetics companies, but that were advocating skin bleaching, which is essentially the process of turning your skin white, right? For years, when you would open up like Vogue magazine and like your, like best models would be, like Caucasians,
Right.
So I thought to myself, what about changing the paradigm here and going from you aspiring to become someone you're not to you understanding that you're beautiful in your own skin and, like giving that power. So that's when I came back to the States and I was like, like there's something to be done there. We could start a skincare company that promotes a message of empowerment, a message of Black is beautiful.
Do you remember how you got started?
So I got started with a Kickstarter campaign. So I got on Kickstarter, I quickly put together a presentation, like with prototypes that I had at the time, and it worked out. Set out, I think it was a 20 days campaign, managed to raise $16,000, and that basically gave us, like a decent amount of money to get, like some basic stuff done. I used a bit of the funding that I had, and I worked with a chemist. There's a certain set of differences that like you have when you have like black skin. We tend, statistically speaking, to have like like dry body, so we need like a moisturizer that's pretty effective on the body, but not so much on the face because we produce a lot of like oil naturally, so you don't want like an overly oily facial cream. It's all formula based, but what you do is you take your formula to a contract manufacturer who then, decides if they can or cannot replicate it.
For the last 4 years, you've been selling online.
We recently started talking with L'Oreal, and we went through like multiple rounds, which gave us a lot of like validation.
During this process of the last 4 years, this is a business that's very capital intensive, and you actually started a different business, which was in the real estate tech space.
Yes. So when I did the math, I realized that it was going to take me a lot more than what I had anticipated to scale this thing. And I come from a business perspective of not, like raising multiple rounds of funding and like diluting until you sort of lose control of your company. I believe in a much more patient form of capitalism where you retain as much ownership as possible, and like you take your time with concepts, right? Especially when you believe you have a strong mission. So that was my approach with Eben. We had a few VCs that wanted to get involved, but like I believe it's a long-term play. I then thought to myself, what can help me generate cash, substantial amount of cash that I can then use to power Eben. And I started seeing how you could disrupt the property management business with short-term rental.
Property manager, and you're also going to run the Airbnb process for them.
Absolutely, yeah.
You started 2 successful businesses within 4 years, and now you're starting a third, which is launching next month, called Congo Clothing.
Yes. It occurred to me that launching a startup with creating awareness around the cause would be the most effective way of helping my country. So that's how the idea of Congo Clothing Company came about. Because what we're doing with that brand is we're essentially shifting the donation paradigm. Elliot, if I go to you and I ask you to give me $100 for the issue of rape in the Congo, although it sounds like a terrible issue, you're not necessarily close enough to it to make that, like money commitment, right? So we had to approach it differently. When you sort of like change the paradigm and all of a sudden I come to you and instead of like saying, hey, Elliot, give me some money, I'm gonna donate that to a hospital on your behalf, I go to you and I'm like, hey, Elliot, here's like a super cool brand. We essentially merge, like denim style, like American jackets, and we add a touch of like, Congolese culture, super swaggy, super cool. You could rock this in like any clubs or like, like any fashionable spots in like London, New York, and Milan or Paris. All of a sudden you're interested because I'm giving you something that you will purchase with your money, but that you will wear with an understanding that, you're rocking something cool. And then what happens afterwards, because there will be an after purchase, right? So what happens afterwards is you'll find yourself becoming an ambassador of the cause because people will ask you, well, where's this pattern from? Like, oh, this is cool. Like, where do you get this from? You will find yourself telling the story of, the brand. It's a Congolese brand, like they are partners with a hospital in the Congo that's run by Dr. Denis Mukwege, who won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2018.
What makes you feel such an allegiance to your country if you only live there for a few years? Like if somebody hears the amount of years that you spent there, it's like you live there from 0 to 2, right? 13, 14. Mm-hmm. How do you, or like, why do you feel such a strong connection?
Well, I feel the connection because first of all, it's my country, it's my birthplace, it's my father's country. And the way I think about it is where are you needed, right? Where can you add value? And for me, that question is very simple. It's my country. My country needs all the help it can get, right? The United States has a lot of brilliant people. It's, the most advanced country in the world. France is, the second largest economy in Europe. You have kids there who studied at Harvard, MIT, and can solve all the problems that like these countries have, and like they're very advanced. Congo right now is at the bottom of the ladder, so I think that when you're from like countries like mine, you need to think very carefully when you go to school in Europe or in the United States about where do you want to like leverage like the brain power that you accumulate.
Here, who's helping if not you?
Absolutely,
that's the mentality that you have.
Yeah. I commend Dr. Mukwege for his work. Panzi Hospital has been founded in 1999, and over the course of the last 20 or so years, he's operated on tens of thousands of women. I mean, he's a true hero without a cape.
You didn't know Dr. Mukwege. You went through great lengths to find him.
Yes. It's actually a funny story. So I knew I wanted to partner with him, right? Because I felt like that was the cause, right? So I figured I needed to meet the man himself. I needed to find a way to get to the doctor. The golden opportunity for me came in September 2019, last year. Every year there's the United Nations General Assembly in Manhattan. You have all the heads of states that congregate here. And because of his stature as a Nobel Peace Prize recipient, Dr. Mukwege has become very much a head of state. Right. Everybody wants to be around him. Everybody wants to lay support to his cause. And I knew he was going to be here. I just needed a way to get to him. So I went through like extraordinary lengths to get his WhatsApp number, which I managed to get. And I started bombarding him with messages, like trying to like briefly explaining the concept. And I was like, I'm gonna be in New York. I know you're super busy, but you need to give me 5 minutes. I need to pitch you that idea. And believe it or not, I got a response from him. And he told me that I could meet with him in New York in between meetings. So I spent 3 days here, basically, like circling around the city, waiting for him. And unfortunately, he was so busy that the meeting could not happen. He had the courtesy to call me and apologize. And he told me that he was flying to Los Angeles, that he had no idea what my schedule looks like, but that in Los Angeles he would have a lot more time and he would be happy to meet me there so that we could talk at length. And I told him that, I would be in LA immediately. So I remember I took a taxi to JFK, and I
Right
just
away.
like hopped on the first flights to Los Angeles right away. He gave me his hotel he was staying at, and I was basically waiting for him there in the lobby. And what I told him essentially is that you're an extraordinary person that's known around the world, but in very specific circles of academics, heads of states, politicians, or maybe kids that are super into these things. But the mainstream market has no idea who you are. You know, as a matter of fact, I talk to a lot of my friends who are extremely smart people, work for the best companies, the Goldman Sachs and the McKinseys of the world. Many of them had no idea that the person who won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2018 was a gynecologist from the Democratic Republic of Congo. And what I told him is that there's a way to sort of like bridge that gap between you and these demographics, which by the way are very affluent. The bridge is essentially something that, you know, like these people can buy. Something that looks cool, something that they'll be happy to wear, something that, you know, like they can seamlessly contribute to a cause with, but without them feeling like they're sort of like giving money away. And thankfully I had a prototype that I'd brought with me of the jacket. It's actually the jacket I'm wearing right now. And
That's what you brought with you?
that's what I brought with me.
This exact jacket?
This exact jacket. And, you know, like I showed him the concept. We're adding basically that element of like African culture, you know, with like, you know, like these patterns that are inspired from the Cuba kingdom. Between the 17th and 20th century, Congo had a very powerful kingdom in the southeastern part of our country today. And they're very famous for their geometric patterns. And so that's where, you know, like our designs, you know, like draw their inspiration from.
Your partnership, right, in this company is you are giving a third of all of the profits back to this hospital.
Yes.
Would you say it's challenging to balance 3 different businesses at the same time?
I think it's very challenging, right? Because, you know, like your currency is your attention in a way. And, you know, like the more you add to the pot, you know, like the more you divide your attention, right? So all of a sudden you're not able to dedicate as much time as you want to like, you know, like each, you know, like specific business. So it's very challenging. My philosophy though is that, you know, like I feel like I'm young. I'm in my 20s, I have a lot of energy. I'm very curious, so I figured that if there was a time to like, you know, like get my feet wet in all these different industries, it was now or never. So I'm embracing the challenge, and I'm, you know, like dedicating, you know, like all the time I have to these concepts, and hopefully make them, you know, successful beyond, you know, my wildest dreams.
Right. What advice would you give, if you can give one piece of advice?
Don't be afraid to fail, literally. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't focus too much on what other people think. You know, because a huge part of, you know, like starting the business is there's also kind of like a glamorous aspect to it, right? And like, you know, your friends will follow your Instagrams, and then you'll throw events, and you want your products to work. And I think that, you know, like people get too caught up in that, you know, like side of things, as opposed to like really focusing on the mission.
Were you ever afraid to fail?
I'm a bit fearless in that sense, so I just go with, you know, like with my gut feeling, and I just like roll with the punches. So to me, fear is something that, you know, like I think I've been pretty good at, you know, like putting it in the back burner.
Right.
You know, being from a country with, you know, like this level of violence and atrocities, and you really see, you know, like the bottom of the bottom, you know, like as far as poverty is concerned. You know, so the reality there is so stark, is so grim in many regards, that I understand that, you know, like there's always, there could be worse, right? So when I think about it that way, it really put things in perspective.
Right, like how can you be scared of?
How could you be scared of
business not going well if like there's people with nothing?
Absolutely.
If I look to you and I see somebody that's in their 20s that already started 3 businesses, like within 5 years out of college, it seems like you may be, you know, becoming a serial entrepreneur, and somebody who over the next 10, 20, 30 years like starts so many businesses, Do you see yourself in that way, or is that something that you're aspiring to be, or are you just taking it day by day and like if you have an idea, you go for it?
Well, my big, I would say, vision, my dream is really to start a conglomerate, right? Like a conglomerate that operates in different sectors, a Congolese conglomerate that employs a lot of people locally, that can be an example for generations to come, that, you know, like we can have our own, you know, juggernauts like, you know, like the Microsofts or the Facebooks or the, you know, you name it of the world.
Something worldwide that comes out of Congo.
Something worldwide that comes out of Congo, but that reaches, you know, like beyond, you know, like industries.